Welcome back to another episode of the Road Racing 360 show presented by 1833 CJ Knows. This week we are talking about the news going on in the sport of road racing. We've got some tragedy from MotoGP, some new bike releases, Michael Vandermark talking about his new ride on the BMW, as well as some new Moto America riders announcing their plans for 2021. As always, we have to thank the show sponsor, 1833 CJ Knows Accident and Injury Law. If you have been in an accident or wrongfully injured, call 1833 CJ Knows. They ride, they race, and they know the law. Give them a call, 1833 CJ Knows. So unfortunately, this week's episode is starting off with some bad news from the world of MotoGP. MotoGP team boss Fausto Gresini has unfortunately lost his battle with COVID. After a long 2-month battle in the hospital dealing with COVID and the complications that he has endured through that, he unfortunately did not make it. Now, Gresini has quite a large part in the MotoGP paddock. He owns a MotoGP team, Moto3 and Moto2 team. So now, on top of being a MotoGP team boss for the last 20 plus years, Gresini was also a very well-respected rider in his own right. He had won 2 championships in the 125cc class back in the 1980s before eventually moving on to being a team owner in the late 90s to the present day. I think the reason that his passing reaches a little bit further than a team boss passing away is due to the fact that he had done it for so long that so many of today's top stars and even past stars had ridden for his team at some point, whether it be at the top level or coming up through their careers in the MotoGP series with Moto3 and Moto2. I'd like to send our condolences to the Gresini family and the friends that have been affected by this tragedy. Moving on to more news from this week, we saw both the Repsol Honda team and the LCR Honda team release their new MotoGP bikes for 2021. Now, the Repsol Honda team, this is another case of a factory team that did not really change the livery of their bike at all. Kind of disappointing. I mean, the Repsol bikes look cool and all, but it is the same thing every year. I swear they don't change a thing. Which, I don't know. I just want them to do something different. It's cool, okay? But give us some spice. This was our first chance to see Marc Marquez and new rider Pol Espargaro in their new leathers with the new bike. Now, there are still questions surrounding Marc Marquez's situation with the recovery from his broken arm from last season. He did say that he will not partake in the tests at Qatar, but he was hoping to be back by the first or the second race. It really just depends on if his arm is able to sustain another crash or not. And sticking with the Marquez family, we saw the LCR Honda team release their new bike in the new Castrol and GV livery. Now, as you see on the screen, that bike has been changed up a little bit, and it is going to be Alex Marquez taking the place of Cal Crutchlow on that team for this season. I gotta say, I do dig the livery change on this bike. The blue, red, white, and green looks pretty good. It is the change that I was looking for. Now, their other bike for LCR is going to still be the Idemitsu Honda branding for Taka Nakagami. That is his own, personal deal. So while they're on the same team, this is another team like Vinci Ducati that is running 2 different liveries, but it is still the same team. So you see what that bike looks like. That bike hasn't changed so much, but the bike Alex Marquez is on does. So looking forward to see what Alex can do on the satellite team there after showing some promise on the Repsol factory bike from last season. And finally, another bike livery presentation was done by Pramac Ducati. We saw team riders Johan Zarco and Jorge Martin in their new colors for 2021. Pramac team is sticking with the same sort of colors, the red, a little bit of white and blue and black in there, but still a little bit different design. It looks pretty sharp. They've got an asymmetrical design on the leathers that looks pretty cool. This is one of the more interesting new teams that I would like to see for this season. One, because they have a MotoGP rookie who had shown some serious speed and talent through the junior classes, as well as an experienced veteran in Johan Zarco. This is also a team that has put some really solid machinery under the riders for the last few seasons and have been able to contend for wins. And seeing what Zarco did last year on the Avinci Ducati, I see no reason why he cannot contend for some more podiums, get some pole positions, and potentially even win a race. Now, on the other hand, Jorge Martin, there are a couple more questions, really just due to the fact that he is a rookie. I don't see a reason why he will not consistently be in the top 10 considering the bike he has and his talent. It might just take a little bit more time to maybe get accustomed to the differences in MotoGP compared to what he is used to in Moto2, but we will find out. It should be a pretty good season for the Pramac boys in 2021. And to wrap up our news in MotoGP this week, we are talking about an undiagnosed injury that Danilo Petrucci announced. Now, this is an injury that he sustained last year when he was riding for Ducati. This was actually at a test session as well. It wasn't even during a MotoGP race weekend. It happened at Jerez when he ended up going down due to an oil spill from Aleix Espargaro's Aprilia. So initially, Petrucci kind of just ignored the injury and let it go, and he kept racing for the remainder of the season. Later on in the season, he noticed he was getting really a loss of feeling in his hands and then started to realize that something was wrong. So after realizing something was wrong, he got it checked out and they discovered 2 hernias on his neck. This has really put a damper on his preparations for the 2021 season and has kind of slowed the progress of him getting ready for his maiden voyage on the Tech 3 KTM. Moving on to World Superbike, we are talking about Michael van der Mark and his experience on the new BMW M1000RR. Now, if you look at this picture, you'll notice that this BMW is the new bike that van der Mark got a chance to test. The new M1000RR has some differences from the base model S1000RR, and the most noticeable aesthetic difference is the wings. The wings are not for show. As van der Mark stated, it does help the bike with its handling. Now, when he compared it to the Yamaha, he said there were a couple differences, and one of them that he was looking to improve on the BMW was the brakes. So in a video on the Facebook Live of BMW Motorrad, he stated what some of the difficulties in adapting his riding style from the Yamaha to the BMW were. In his words, he said, "I can be really aggressive and I can also be very smooth. One thing that the bike must be able to do really well is stop, because I like to brake hard and late, but the bike really needs to help me as well with this. If it does that, I feel quite good already. The Yamaha stops really well, and this is something that we have to improve on the BMW. But the BMW turns really tight compared to the Yamaha. Both have better and worse parts, so we need to put them together." So I think his statements make me believe that this might take a little bit of time on the BMW to get some of the preferences that he has for the bike to be worked out in his favor. While I think the BMW has a lot of potential, I think with it being a new model, it is going to take a little bit of time for them to really realize and maximize the most they can out of that bike. So I'm expecting the first few rounds to provide a little bit less as far as results go compared to what we'll see later on in the season. Him on that new BMW M1000RR this season. He's also going to be joined by Eugene Laverty and Jonas Folger. Both those guys are going to be on a separate team, but they'll both be developing the new BMW. So between those 3 riders, there is a lot of experience, so I think that's going to play into BMW's benefit, just due to the fact that these guys have ridden MotoGP bikes, different World Superbike manufacturers, and are going to be able to take a lot of the comments that these guys have and develop a pretty competitive weapon. Now on to Moto America. This week we did hear some news of some new riders making the jump up to a new class. So both Dominic Doyle and Sam Lockoff are going to be making the jump up to the Supersport class. Lockoff is going to be joining the Team Hammer on an M4 X-Star Suzuki. I think that is a great place for a young rider like him who is still developing. We saw him improve quite a bit throughout the season last year, so going to a team with as much history and experience as Team Hammer is really going to benefit him as a rider. We also see Lockoff training with a new rider coach in PJ Jacobson. There's pictures of them riding the Team Hammer bikes out at Jennings last weekend. What that means for PJ's future, I'm not sure. There may be some rumors floating around that he could be riding for Team Hammer next year. Nothing confirmed though. I guess we'll have to wait and see if anything comes from that. Now the other rider moving up, Dominic Doyle, he's actually sticking with the same team in Bartcon Racing, except he is moving up from his Ninja 400 up to a Kawasaki ZX6. Last season we saw the ZX6 kind of display its dominance with Richie Escalante on the bike, and now we're going to see what Dominic Doyle can do as he makes his journey into Supersport. This past weekend we also saw Matt Scholtz get back on the bike for the first time since his injury at the Indianapolis Moto America race last season. Now, if you remember, Matt had some pretty severe injuries to his ankle and leg, and it wasn't even due to the crash itself. It was due to the fact that Cameron Beaubier's bike came careening in like a bowling ball and just wiping him out. So after a lot of recovery and time doing some rehab back home in South Africa, Matt finally came back to the States earlier this month and was able to get back on the Westby Yamaha R1 Superbike. Didn't get a full day of testing due to some cold weather in the morning. He was able to get a few sessions back on the bike, and it seems like he is going to be one of the contenders and one of the favorites for the championship this season in Superbike. And that's all we got from the sport of road racing this week. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Road Racing 360 show presented by 1833 CJ Knows. It's still the off season. Not a ton of preseason testing is kicked off yet. So we will be bringing you more news as that gets underway and bikes start to get on track. I believe there are still some rider announcements left to be done for Moto America Superbike. So once we get word of those, we'll let you know. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next episode.